Ooh, baby, you're listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and it's another week in Groundhog Day, and I'm sure most of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I know I say it every week, but what a crazy world we are living in. I mean, my Christmas tree has been up since Halloween. We've already done all of our holiday shopping. The Christmaka card is being sent out this week. If you don't get one and think you should be on my list, sorry, I probably have the wrong address, and don't worry about sending me an updated one, though. That would just make things awkward. Anyways, we are getting shit checked off the list quickly in my house, and good thing, because it's almost time to go to the mountain. The summit at Snoqualmie opens up tomorrow, and I'm psyched to get there. It's going to be strange, though. My family has been so away from people, especially at this time of the year where it gets cold and you can't really do too many outdoor gatherings. So heading to a place where a lot of people are coming together to recreate outside is something that we've been looking forward to since last March, but it's also something that is going to be totally strange for us, but something that we need for our sanity. While I've been fine mental health-wise throughout this pandemic, I'm not sure what would happen if I didn't have this escape. But I do for now, and that's all that matters, I guess, is right now, because who knows what's going to happen in a month, 2 months, who knows? Another thing that's not normal in my world is that I'm recording this intro before I even record the podcast. The reason? TGR reached out to me recently, and they were like, hey, Elena Hight has this movie coming out in December. It's called Blank Canvas. It's going to hit iTunes on December 8th, and is there any chance you could get Elena on the podcast to promote it? And I was like, sure. No problem. And boom, we're doing the interview on a Thursday afternoon, the Monday before the podcast will drop. And you'll be able to buy the movie on Tuesday, so it's perfect timing. And I'm never good at timing a promotion like that. So you'll be able to hear Elena today. You'll be able to buy her movie tomorrow. And her movie's incredible. There's some big names in the movie that you'll hear about in the podcast. But before we talk about Elena and the movie, I need to ask you to do a few things for me. The first is subscribe to the podcast and review me wherever you listen to the show. I'll give detailed instructions on how to review me in the outro, but these two things help the show grow. What also helps the show grow is you telling a friend who's into skiing or snowboarding about the podcast. Just be like, hey, have you heard the Powell Movement? It's an awesome podcast and you'll love it. Put it on the way up to the hill, whatever. Finally, I want to ask you to support my amazing sponsors. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Cole Headwear, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, let's jump into the life and times of Elena Hight. I saw your movie. It's awesome. I thank you for sending me the pre-link so I could see it before it came out. And a lot of athletes come to a crossroads in their career. I've seen it so many times in ski and snowboard where the athlete does really well in the contest game for a long time and then they burn out or they want to get out or they want to transition into a life of filming. It doesn't work out for everybody, but a lot try this route. And I would say with you and the Blank Canvas movie, is the movie about you fully embracing that crossroads and you're kind of like, fuck it, I'm going to make a movie about people actually seeing me try to make this transition?
Exactly. I think you nailed it. I mean, the idea behind Blank Canvas was really to inspire people to get out of their comfort zones, really, and pursue where their heart is calling them. But in that, I think I wanted to really show the raw, real side of making a transition like that. And that it's not always easy and that you're going to fail and that having that humbling experience and being able to move through it and become a beginner, it's scary, and it's scary to step outside of your comfort zone and pursue something new or make a transition in your life, whether for me it's in my sport and within snowboarding or, you know, in a career or in a personal way. But I just wanted to inspire people to take that risk because I think life is all about taking risks.
Do you look at the movie as a way to like prove it in one shot? Because it's not really one shot. You were in Antarctica last year. I mean, you've done a bunch of different things. But with this one, it's like, hey, saying, I'm done with the contest world pretty much. I'm going to step out into the backcountry. I'm going to have these huge names that I'm going to put myself right next to. They're peers of mine, but I haven't done the same kind of shit that they've done in their careers. And I'm going to see almost how I stand up with them and if my future can keep going like they have been able to do with their careers.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it that way, but absolutely. I think that for me, when I wanted to start this film, I knew that I was going to need help and mentorship and that I wasn't a seasoned veteran and that I wasn't super knowledgeable in this space and that I could only learn by doing and taking the time and stepping into it. And so I wanted to have those riders alongside me who, one, who have inspired me to do this in the first place, and two, who I've really been inspired by throughout my career, whether it's their approach to snowboarding or what they've done on a snowboard or how they've given back to the industry or just followed their careers. And I love their style and the way they look at the mountains. So I think every rider in here was someone who I really reached out to say, like, can you help me along this process? And the really amazing part of making this film was everyone's willingness to share their knowledge and passion and excitement for the mountains with me was like overwhelmingly positive. And it was so cool because they knew I wasn't going to be the best one out there. And they still wanted to take me out and help teach me and guide me along the process regardless. And I think that that's one of the things that's so special about snowboarding is that, you know, our mountain community is tight-knit and wants to share that passion and pass it along. And that's how our sport continues to grow, is because every individual is passing that along to the next generation.
Yeah, and you pick Hana to go with you to Japan. And that one, she's so knowledgeable and she's such an awesome person, so positive to be around. Like, is it pretty much to grab your heroes and go and just be a sponge?
Yeah, that was my thought process behind this, is that I'm making this huge transition. Like, I'm going to approach every single one of my heroes in the sport and the people that inspire me and hopefully be able to just learn from them. And it really ended up working out that way. I mean, Hana is one of my favorite female snowboarders, and she was the first person to ever bring me into the backcountry. You know, after a contest somewhere, she was like, come on this trip with me, and doubled me out on her snowmobile and helped me like learn how to navigate down a line. And I tomahawked down the whole thing, I'm pretty sure. And she like came and, you know, talked me up and said I was all good. And even though I was totally embarrassed, but she's been like such a mentor to me of like really standing up for me and saying like, you can do this. And like, if you want to come out here and do this, like there's a space for you. And so having her a part of the movie was really essential for me because she's been such a big part of my transition.
So you have her, you know, and you're comfortable with her. She's seen you tomahawk here and there before, so you can handle that. But is it nerve-wracking having arguably the best rider of our time, if not all time, coming to ride with you in zones that you might not be comfortable in, having Travis Rice there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Travis is, yeah, like you said, arguably one of the best riders of our time. And his approach to snowboarding is really, really impressive. And just his knowledge is like overwhelming. Like you ask him about snow or mountains or just like anything, and he has so much knowledge from the years that he's spent on a snowboard. So yeah, being out in the mountains with him was a different vibe. But the amazing thing about Travis is that he's a snowboarder. Like he loves snowboarding, and he was really excited to like be out with the girls and be out with me and pass along this knowledge that he has to me and share some of the wisdom that he's built up along the years. And I don't think he necessarily does that every day. And so I think it was fun for him.
So in that first part of the movie, it's just like rock stars on that trip. You know, you've got Travis, you've got Hana, and then you make your way back to Tahoe and maybe the biggest, most intimidating line of your life, Grizzly Spines. This is a rowdy Jeremy Jones paradox line. And you had been there earlier in the season and the weather didn't line up for you. It was just socked in. And how frustrating is it just to put in all that work just to get to the top of the zone and you just have to sit there and wait? Like what goes through your head as you're just like, oh, is it ever going to clear up?
Yeah, you know, Mother Nature does what she wants. And it's definitely been an adjustment from competitive snowboarding where we're on a very tight schedule and sometimes contests get canceled, but it's because there's a huge storm or it's absolutely we're unable to run the contest. Where in filming, you can plan as much as you want to hit a feature, or you think that things are going to blow in a certain way, or you think the clouds aren't going to come in, but we never really know. And so you have to be a lot more spontaneous and flexible and just willing to wait. And it created a lot of patience in my snowboarding. I think I learned a lot of patience over the last few years. And yeah, it's tough to like identify an objective and get to the top of it, and then the clouds move in and you can't ride it. And it can be a little defeating, but it's so sweet when it all lines up and it goes your way. It like makes you forget about all the hard times.
And I would think you have two different types of waiting in your life. The contest waiting where they're like, Elena, you're going to drop in 2 minutes, and you sit there and then they're like, actually, that's going to be 8 minutes because we've got these commercials and we've got to cut to here. And you never really know when you're going to go. And then they're like, 20 seconds, you're dropping in and you're like, holy shit, I've got to get my bindings ready to go. And then you're in and everything happens. Or there's sitting for 3.5 hours getting cold. And then it's like you have to do the scariest thing you've ever done in your entire life.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think that there's like the contest waiting where you're like amping beyond. And then there's the waiting of like, you don't know how long you're going to be there. And so you have to really manage your energy and your adrenaline and your food and water. And yeah, it was an adjustment. I mean, I competed for so long that I think I got used to those like, oh, we're on a commercial hold, like wait for a minute. Like you just go into a space where you're like, okay, I can hold this adrenaline for 60 more seconds. You'll be fine. But when you're just sitting, not knowing when you're going to go, it can drain you for sure. But it also like creates the funnest memories in the mountains. Like you hang out with the crew and everyone, you know, starts bantering. And that's the stuff that makes the credits, you know, all the storytelling and the time passing.
Yep. So you don't get it that time and you have to come back. And when you do come back, I think the weather's much better. And when you're on a top of a gnarly line like that and there's no stopping, it's a no fall zone and you're totally committed, the moments before you drop in where you realize like, holy shit, this is happening and this is the thing I've been waiting for and scared of my entire life all at the same time. Like what's going through your physical being? Is your heart pounding through your chest? Do you find a moment of calm? What goes through your head?
Oh my gosh, yeah. My heart was definitely beating through my chest. And I think that in those moments right before dropping, it's just like you take a deep breath and try to remember just like, this is what I've been striving to do and calm the nerves a little bit and go. Try not to think too much.
Because once you're in the line, there's no turning back. I think you probably lose yourself completely in the moment. You don't even know what your name is at that point. You're just part of the mountain at that point. And when you get that line, it's just all soak and elation. And it makes me think that like you have two different types of stoke and elation. You get through that line and it's like an out-of-body experience, I'm sure, where you're so excited. But then you've won the X Games and you've come down and landed that perfect run that you've always wanted to have. And what's the better feeling, like where you get to that finish corral and you lose your mind there, or you lose your mind after getting that run in the mountains? Given they're totally different. One's in front of millions of people and a TV audience and one's in front of 4. But what's the difference there?
Honestly, I think it's very similar. There's a lot of similarities to freestyle backcountry riding and competing in the sense that like at the top you have this immense sense of like pressure to perform and nerves, and you have to harness that, and it creates this like hyper awareness and presence. And like I think that presence is what draws me to snowboarding so much. I think it's a present moment feeling that I only really harness in snowboarding. And like you said, you kind of black out, like you're one with the snowboard, you're going down. It's like an all or nothing moment, whether you're in a half pipe or, you know, on a super steep line. And you get to the bottom and you were so in the present moment that you could have forgotten that anything else even existed. And when it all goes your way and you land and it comes out successfully, like coming to the bottom of Grizzly Spines was like just this insane amount of relief and excitement. But I think it really parallels landing a contest run in the half pipe. I think it's like such a similar feeling. And, you know, afterwards you got a lot more people to celebrate with when you're at a contest.
Sure.
But having that core group of people in the backcountry, like it really bonds you. So I think that you create these like really tight knit bonds with your crew and your friends. So that's just as satisfying.
Nice. Well, the movie ends with a trip to Pemberton with Jake Blofeld, and the movie's awesome. Everybody should check it out. And if they're listening today, they should be able to download it on iTunes tomorrow. But through this whole project, you're able to learn from like living legends. And if you had to take like one piece of deep insight that you pull from Hana or Travis or Danny Davis or Nick Russell or Sammy or all the badasses that are in that movie, what did you learn?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much from all of these riders. I think that they all are, like you said, legends in their own right. And I would say that the number one lesson that I learned was just to enjoy the moment. I think that these experiences don't last very long, and everyone in their own right, says we are so blessed to be able to be on our snowboards every day and pursuing this dream. And you got to just live in the moment as much as you can and take it all in.
Before you're able to learn that lesson or any lessons from the best in the world in snowboarding, you have to get into snowboarding first. And you come from a place where people may have expected you to be a surfer. You were born in Kauai and you were there till you were like 6. And are you Hawaiian? Are you a haole? What gives, brah?
Totally. I wish I was Hawaiian. I am not. My dad grew up in Los Angeles and then moved to the islands when he was a teenager. And so I was born on Hawaii, and my dad was a surfer his whole life. But honestly, he used to go to the mountains every winter just to get off the island, and skied for a long time, and then started snowboarding like right when it became a sport, and loved it. And so when my family relocated to the mountains, the first thing he did was teach us all to snowboard. So surfing definitely runs deep in the family, but not Hawaiian, although I would love to be. And surfing, like I surfed as a kid, but I didn't really start learning to surf until I was a teenager. And it's definitely a part of my blood. I love it so much. It's so hard. It's just the hardest sport to learn. But I'm getting there, little by little.
And when you were learning snowboarding and you moved to the mainland, because you're like 6 years old, you read a bunch of things and it says you're from the Tahoe area. But I read that you learned to snowboard in Boise. Where did you go first?
When we first relocated, my family actually moved to Idaho. So my first days on a snowboard were in Idaho at Bogus Basin, which is like this little resort outside of Boise. And then pretty quickly from there, we moved to Lake Tahoe. And so I really grew up learning to ride in Tahoe at Heavenly, Kirkwood, Sierra. I lived in the South Shore. So those were kind of my stomping grounds up until I was a teenager when I started really traveling for competitions.
Was there gymnastics too? Because I read there was some gymnastics in your background as well. And did that happen before snowboarding, or is that all at the same time?
Yeah, that happened before snowboarding. I took to gymnastics as like a little kid. I think I just had a lot of energy. And so my family would send me to the gym, help me burn it all off every day. And I loved gymnastics. I actually wanted to be an Olympic gymnast. Like that was my dream as a kid. I used to have all these gymnast posters in my room.
Dominique Dawes.
Oh my gosh, Dominique Dawes was like a hero to me. And the year that she did really well, a part of the Magnificent Seven, 1996, I believe, Olympics, when the U.S. gymnast team won, that was like, I'm becoming a gymnast. I'm doing this. Like I was 7 or 8, maybe. Super young, but I was a passionate young kid. So I would spend every day and at night in gymnastics. And I think that really actually helped my snowboarding a lot, because as a young kid, I had really good air awareness and was used to like being in the air and flipping around and just had that like body confidence. And so as I started snowboarding, I think that translated, and eventually my family was like, you have to choose. And I loved snowboarding, and I think I was better at snowboarding. I was doing a lot better at the time. So I was like, I want to snowboard. And that's kind of where the gymnastics ended for me.
Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break. And my first sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. If you haven't noticed, 10 Barrel supports so much in the world of ski, snowboard, and bike. But another cool thing about 10 Barrel is that they also do so much out-of-the-box fun shit, like giving away old Army vehicles filled with beer and so much more. I could go on and on about the antics, the Pray for Snow Winter Ale, and the Profuse Juice Hazy IPA that I've been drinking a ton of, or how they give back to protect our winners and support so many important athletes and causes, but I don't have enough time. To find out more, head on over to 10barrel.com and you'll get all that info, and next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel. My next sponsor is Stanley, and they pretty much invented the category of containers that keep things hot and cold. And there is no other product on the market that comes close to doing this as well as what Stanley does. If you've owned a Stanley, you still have it and know exactly what I'm talking about. And this year, if you're a skier or a snowboarder and you're going to do the mountain right, you're going to have soups, coffee, hot chocolate, and you're going to keep that all in the car. And most likely, you don't have all the containers you're going to need to keep that stuff hot or cold. The good thing is, I'm going to make it easier than ever for you to save 30% when you're buying the amazing products from Stanley. And all you need to do is to head on over to stanley-pmi.com, go shopping, enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you'll get the deal and save 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. You start competing around 8 or 9 years old. I think it's the USASA stuff. And by the time you're 11 years old, people are calling you the future of snowboarding. And I would think that there's pros and industry folks that just happen to see you ride and realize that, like, this is going to be one of the next people. And who are those people that kind of take you under their wing and show you the ropes?
Oh my gosh, I've had so many mentors over the years. But yeah, I got super lucky as a kid and got my first snowboard from Burton when I was 8 years old. I think the local rep in Tahoe saw me at a little contest and came up and gave me a snowboard. So really from the beginning, I had just like a lot of support and mentors. And when I was super young, you know, it was like Shannon Dunn and Tina Bassett and Roberta Rogers. And they were like the women around Tahoe who were big those days that I wanted to be like. And then as I started getting into halfpipe more, and when I first did like my first big professional events, it was like Kelly Clark and Gretchen Bleiler and Danny Cass and Ross Powers and JJ Thomas. So I remember doing my first professional event, and back in those days, the events were like open, like anyone could pay to enter a pre-qualifying round. And I ended up making it to finals, and I was like in the start gate with like Kelly Clark, and I was just like shitting my pants, you know? Like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, she's my hero. And couldn't believe it. And I was just like so small and intimidated. And then like a year passed by, and then I was on the US snowboard team with her and all of my heroes. And I was like their little shithead sister who kept getting in trouble that they had to look after. But they became such big mentors to me and really like shaped my snowboarding in so many ways and taught me the ropes and let me hang out with them, even though I was, you know, multiple years younger than them. And yeah, I owe a lot to those guys.
And, you know, this is jumping way ahead of the game, but Kelly Clark came up, and I might as well bring this part up too, because I don't know how good of friends you are with her, but if you look at it on paper, it's like she was your nemesis throughout your whole career. It's like if she did not exist, you would have so many gold medals at X Games, and it probably wouldn't change the Olympics that much, but it just seemed like she always overshadowed you just a little bit. Like in 2013, I believe it was like when you do the alley-oop dub back rodeo, and that should win you gold. Like that is the trick you've worked your whole life for. And she just boosts like a huge 1080 or two huge 1080s and steals victory from the jaws of defeat and just takes it from you. And is there ever any animosity towards her? Like, God, fuck that girl. She just, she sucks.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly was so dominant. I mean, you can't help but like think she was going to win every contest forever. And man, she worked really hard for it. I think that Kelly has done so much for the sport. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely times when I was like, I just want to beat Kelly. But I've always stayed really good friends with her. And she's been such a big, like, inspiration in so many ways. I think because she continued to push me in that way. And we were friends and we'd train together and, like, push each other to be the best that we could be. And it was this constant kind of, like, pressure battle that no one could get lazy. So I think it kept us both on our toes, and she's so amazing and has done so much for me over the years. So there was never any bad feelings towards her. But there was a few events where I was like, man, I just wanted to beat you. Like, well, you just let me win once? Come on.
Well, that was jumping way ahead. But what's weird for me is I look at your life as it's never, ever totally normal. Like, you do so well that you're like catapulted into like a level of, I won't say fame, but people know who you are from your snowboarding, and people are just inflating your ego and just telling you how great you are, which is great. I think you handle it well too. but it's also like homeschooling, and your dad kind of gets it from his surfer mentality of like, he knows how you're going to be a pro in this industry. And is there ever any regular school and regular stuff for you, or are you always in like the circuit and the cycle and the tour?
Yeah, I lived a very unconventional life for sure. I was really lucky to have very supportive parents, like you said, and both my mom and my dad really like helped me along the way, whether it was homeschooling or it was like driving me to contests or flying and meeting me at contests because I didn't want to be places alone, or just the amount of like love and support that I had from them really like made my career possible, essentially. But I think there was moments when I wanted to like have a bit of a normal life. I went to high school for like one semester as a freshman just because I really wanted to go to high school, and it was in the fall and I wasn't snowboarding, and I wanted to go to homecoming and like do the normal thing for like 3 months, and then that was it. That was like the end of it. I never went back. I homeschooled.
Did someone ask you to homecoming?
I did. I got to go to homecoming with one of my good friends. I actually saw some photos from it the other day. It was pretty funny. I wore a polka dot dress.
Okay.
So, like I did a couple normal things here and there, but traveling the world is a pretty amazing life coach and school teacher. So I think I learned a lot, even though I wasn't in a normal high school.
I can imagine that you learned a lot. It's just so crazy to me because I happen to own one of these children thing. Mine's 11. And I mean, by the time you were 13, you were like the first girl, woman, whatever to do a 900. And it's like you're going from being the little kid to a bona fide threat, but you are still like a little kid. I can't imagine my kid traveling the world for anything, like by himself and meeting parents places. But that's the kind of world is a little bit different when you were coming up and you're on top of it. And that's just kind of what happened. You end up getting that 900. It's like your first big contest, your first big podium. And is it just amazing how everything happens so fast? Like from there, you go to X Games, I feel like.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. I basically entered into this pro event and just was having so much fun and threw a 900, and I got third at that event and got an invite to X Games that year. And I think went to the Open later on. And yeah, it all happened really, really fast. And, as a 13-year-old, I'm just along for the ride. Like, cool, this is amazing. I'm so excited. Probably never even thought about it. I can imagine my parents were a little stressed out, but they were so supportive. And I think it was a little bit of a different time back then, like the world was a little bit calmer. And I had a really, really great support system and a lot of people watching out for me and just there for me always. And so it all worked.
And I would think, though, that it has to be like a circus sideshow because at the X Games, when you're that young, you're like a media darling, I would think. Cameras all in your face, like they want to get the cute little kid before you aren't the cute little kid anymore. Because if you get on the podium at 15, 16 years old, it's like they can sell the shit out of you, and they're very excited about that. Did you feel that first couple years?
Yeah, I did. I think I thrived off of it, though. Like, I think that I knew I wanted to be a pro snowboarder from when I was really young. And so when it all started happening, I was like, this is it. Like, this is my dream come true. Like, how do I keep this going? Like, any way possible. And so I think like the media and the pressure can kind of get to you, and it's gotten to me in different various stages of my career. But overall, especially in the beginning, I was just like living this childhood dream, and I was quite protected from my family still and didn't have a ton of pressures from sponsors or anything like that. So I think those were like the golden days.
The days you're just happy to be there and just take it all in?
Yeah, just happy to be there, no pressure, just like throw down, and started doing really well. And it was just like fun and games, and like however big and however many spins you can throw, like do it. And when you're that young, you like can't get hurt. You're like bounce back from anything. Your bones are like rubber.
Yep.
So it's just like you have a leg up, I think, as a kid.
Yeah. And it's a weird existence, like I said, where you say the world traveled, you learn so much, which I totally understand, regardless of your age. When you are 15 to about when you're 30 or pretty close to that, you're probably not at home for more than like a month at a time ever. How do you live that life? Just out of a suitcase and you just deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I have been traveling pretty full time since I was 15 years old and have not spent that much time at home and really just adapted to it. I think that I really love being on the road and I love doing what I do. And this lifestyle's given me so much, and it can be tiring. I mean, I think that being on the road constantly, it's exhausting, but it also is like so stimulating, especially when you're pursuing your passion and your dream. I think that we get to fly around and snowboard in some of the most beautiful places in the world and experience these really amazing cultures and do it alongside of some of my best friends. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than that.
Yeah, and in terms of travel experiences, I've talked to a couple different people who have like been taken off the plane and put into like a Porsche or a BMW and taken to their next plane. And they've had all kinds of different travel perks from all the miles that they've gotten. What's the coolest perk that you've had just from all your travels?
Oh, travel perks. Man,
I would think you expect to be upgraded to first class now, right? That just happens.
Yeah, the first class upgrade's a nice travel perk. I don't know. I don't have really any crazy stories. One was I got to fly home on one of the like US team's biggest donors private jet from the Olympics. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty baller.
Yeah. When I was going home after the games, they were like, "We'll give you guys a ride, no problem." We were like, "Yeah, that sounds awesome."
That's amazing. Well, speaking of the games, the first time that you make the games, it's like 2006. You're like 16 years old and you haven't had a ton of international travel yet. You haven't been on an Olympic stage. And when you achieve your goals at 16, well, your goal is probably to win the gold. But I would think when you're younger, I don't know if you think I'm going to win an Olympic gold medal or I'm going to go to the Olympics. And what's the feeling like at that point? Does it feel like everything's going to be easier in your career because it has been so far?
Oh, gosh. Those first games were like definitely a turning point for me. Up until that point was definitely the underdog and just fighting to like make a name for myself in snowboarding and having a lot of fun and didn't have so much pressure. And I think that's why I qualified for the games, is just because I was like so carefree. But then I showed up at the Olympic Games, I think unprepared for like the amount of pressure that I would feel.
Sure.
And I remember walking into the opening ceremonies, with Team USA into this like massive auditorium with thousands and thousands of people. And that's when it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm at the Olympics. Like, how did I get here? Like, it was almost like I had been like in a dream up until that point, like I didn't realize it was happening. And then it hit me. I was like, oh no, like I cracked a little bit. I cracked for the next few days and like was totally overwhelmed and snowboarded horrible. I remember all the practice for that event and just like couldn't get it together. But I did pretty well in that event. I ended up 6th place, which, I mean, making the Olympics, and I just wanted to make finals. And so I really achieved my goal and I was really happy with how it all turned out. And I landed my runs and it was like a huge success. But coming out of that, I kind of had this experience of pressure finally and feeling that pressure. And so I think that it was a bit of a turning point and a bit of like a maturing point for me where I was like, okay, like this is a bit of a career now, which causes its own, stresses and pressure on anyone who turns a hobby or a passion into a full-time career.
Yeah, well, getting 6th is nothing to be ashamed of, though. It's like you can leave the Olympics pretty stoked. And while there is more pressure on you, you go into the X Games the next year and you get your first podium at X. So it's like you can feel the trajectory of your career going up and up because that X Games is a major statement for you in your career. It's like I can not only be in these contests with all the best in the world, like I can stand on the podium with them. And then fast forward to your second Olympic experience. And I would think there's a ton more pressure than what you had when you were 15 years old because people expect more from you now because you've been on the global stage for a lot longer. And do you feel that weight on your shoulders going into 2010?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, going into that Olympics, I really was like there to win, and I felt a lot of pressure from the outside, but also personal pressure. I think that I had these big dreams and goals and with anything that's that big as the Olympics or any goal that takes a lot of time and effort and consistency to like finally come upon and years of planning and prep, really, I think that I was old enough to like realize the pressure. And yeah, it adds an element of just like intensity to the event and intensity to what you're doing. But ultimately, like, I think what I've carried away from snowboarding is these are just great learning experiences for real life, like at the end of the day, it's just a snowboard and you're just riding half pipe. And of course it means a lot, but like your ability to be a good, kind person is just as valuable as doing well on a snowboard.
Tell that to the guy at Amex that wants to pay 150 grand for the front of your helmet. And he doesn't care if you're a good person. He wants you he wants you to be a good person as well. But he wants you on the podium winning a gold medal and not having any negative stories about you as well. But, in terms of sponsorship for being one of those Olympic athletes, because you can really cash in on being an athlete with these Olympics because it's the biggest thing in exposure for brands that are especially outside of snowboarding that want to pay to play inside this world. And every 4 years, do you get one-off offers that like, hey, we want to sponsor you for 1 year with the goal that you're going to be on the podium and we're going to pay you a shitload of money to do it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that that's definitely part of the Olympics. And you see it in every sport. You see it in our snowboarding. You see it in every sport. And it's a really cool opportunity, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, the snowboard industry is amazing, but it's not the highest paying thing. And, over the years, we've had our own struggles as an industry. So having these like outside corporate sponsors come in and say, we want to pay you to like do what you love. I mean, that's amazing. And I had a couple opportunities like that over the years. And yeah, it was amazing. I mean, my kind of philosophy behind partnerships is to only work with brands that I really actually can stand behind, that I would endorse regardless if they were paying me or not.
Did you do an energy drink at one point?
Yep. I rode for Monster for a little while when I was young, and then I rode for Rockstar for a little while. And I actually ended up leaving Rockstar because I couldn't align with not necessarily Rockstar, but just the energy drink industry. I finally like got old enough at that point. I think I was like 19, and I realized that just like what I was doing. And that was kind of the point in my career where I realized like I'm speaking to a lot of people, and like I have this platform, this public platform, and with it comes, it comes a little responsibility. And for me, like I want to be inspiring and share inspiring things to the younger generation and push products and brands that I really believe in that are doing good things for the planet and for the world and for your health. So that was like a turning point for me when I realized like I really need to like make sure that all the brands that I work with are creating positive messages and positive outcomes for myself and for those who see me endorsing it.
And being on the pro level, you say you can't really make like the money that you can make in other sports, or you might not have said that, but you said you weren't making a ton of money. But I mean, can someone on the Olympic level, can you make like $500,000 a year if you're competing and doing well and have your 5 to 6 sponsors?
I think it varies for everyone,
It does vary for everybody. There's so many different tracks in snowboarding. But in the track that you were on, it was like a lot of money has been shifted from every other venue in snowboarding almost to the contest athlete when the contest became bigger, because you have to have those people out there. So there was always a school of two thoughts of like, do we put all our money into video and film stuff that's going to live forever? Or do we carve out 50% of our budget and put it into 2 contest athletes, and hopefully they'll be able to generate a ton of exposure and revenue for the brand? I don't know if it really generates a ton of sales, but if it did, all the halfpipe riders would have pro models.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I mean, I think that it's multifaceted, right? Like in the 90s, people were making crazy money. The industry was thriving. Like people were buying so much snowboard stuff that all of that money was going back into the athletes as well. And over the years, it's flattened and it's dwindled a little bit. But I think that there are these opportunities with other companies coming into the space and helping elevate the sport in a lot of ways, whether it's through the Olympics or through other events or whatever that might be. And I think that athletes in our world, of course, we're not making the same as like football players or baseball players. And like some of the athletes you look at and you're like, wow, they're making insane amount of money. But the difference and the benefit that we have as snowboarders is like our careers can last for so long. And usually the companies that support us for long periods, or like throughout your career, like you maybe might not make as much on the yearly basis, but over a 20-year career, like you're doing really well and you're giving back to the sport. And it depends. I think it depends on how everything shakes out.
Now it's time for me to take another sponsor break, and next up is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. If you don't know Peter Glenn, well, they started in Vermont over 60 years ago when retail was king, and they've been the brand that has helped build skiing and snowboarding on the East Coast forever. They still have that retail element, but now everyone can shop at Peter Glenn because they also play against the big internet brands too. And guess what? They'll price match the big guys, offer free shipping on orders over $49, and have great deals on the best brands. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Cole Headwear. And you know what everyone needs this winter? A beanie. And a lot of times you get a beanie and it doesn't have the right fit and you end up looking stupid. That has happened to me way too often in life. Until I found Cole Headwear. I've been wearing their beanies at least 10 years before I started this podcast because I knew when I bought one, it would look right on my head. And my shit always looks fresh because I wear Cole. That goes for hats too, but it's winter, so we're talking beanies. And I'm going to save you 15% off your entire Cole order. When you head on over to coleheadwear.com, go shopping, enter the code POWEL, the number 15. It's all one word, no caps or spaces, and you will get that 15% off. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. We don't really need to talk about money much anymore, but what we will talk about is Vancouver and the Olympics there. So you make the Olympic team, you make the finals, but you don't get on the podium. I think you were in ninth place or something like that, where you could handle that if it was your first time around, like walking with ninth place. You're like, I made the finals. This is all right. My career's getting started. But your career has been going for a little while. You go in there probably with high hopes and a ton of confidence, like I'm going to do really well, maybe right below Kelly. And then you don't podium. I mean, do you leave that one totally bummed? And does it light a fire under you to want to make another run at the Olympics? Or does it make you want to maybe step back and not compete? Or where are you in your head?
Vancouver was a tough games for me. I had high hopes of being on the podium and that didn't come to fruition. And I think I was a little bit defeated after that for a little while as far as competing. I felt like, defeated for maybe a year even. But ultimately, I had a lot to learn and a lot of growth to do in my snowboarding still. And so I think once I got over being bummed and feeling sorry for myself, it really did light a fire under me. And it helped fuel the next 8 years of my competitive career and really made me have to question myself of why I was snowboarding and make sure it wasn't just for the results, because the results come and go. But if you're happy with what you're doing, regardless, then your career is a success.
Yeah. And leading up to your potential third games, you have your double. You win the most important event in snowboarding, arguably the US Open. You've been to 4 straight X Games and gotten on podiums. And at this point, you've got to have this supreme confidence that you're going to podium at the Olympics. And you decide you're going to document your run at gold. To me, that's crazy because if you're going to document your run at gold for sponsors, for yourself, that's like you're taking another level of pressure and putting it right on your shoulders before anything even starts. And looking back on it, does that even create another level of pressure? Or is it just all in your head throughout that whole run up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it did definitely create another level of pressure, just having that documentation of the ups and downs. And I ended up not making that games. I completely crumbled in the qualifying process. For whatever reason, the pressure just really got to me. And I had the talent and the results to make it happen, but
you could see it on your face, though. You just didn't have the confidence. You didn't have that swagger at all. It was, from what I saw, at least, it just didn't look like you had that killer mentality that I would think that you would have. But that's me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, that year was tough. I mean, it's crazy when you go into the Olympics, it's every 4 years. So, right, you're thinking about this thing for 4 years, and then it finally comes time to qualify for it. And you're already thinking about the end game, which is getting to the Olympics. And sometimes the qualifying kind of slips by and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what happened? I completely blew that. I don't know. Throughout my career, I've kind of been an all or nothing snowboarder most of my life, and for good or bad. And I think that during that run specifically, I was really focused on doing my double. It was something I was really gung-ho about, and that trick caused me a lot of issues. I did not have it dialed, and I fell a lot on it, and it definitely hindered my ability to qualify. But I really wanted to do it, so I was pretty gung-ho about keeping it in my run. And, I think that could have turned out better if I would have just took it down a notch. But can't go back in time.
Sure. Well, there's a bunch of takeaways from watching this little web series. The first thing I noticed is that you're not on Burton anymore. And Burton was your board sponsor forever. What happened with them?
Yeah, I rode for Burton from when I was super young, like 8 years old. I think I got my first snowboard until I was 19. And a few years before, I had started riding for Volcom, just streetwear. And Billy Anderson, who was a longtime friend and the head of snow over at Volcom, came to me and offered me a position to be like the main girl over at Volcom if I left Burton. And he wanted to start making snowboards.
Were you part of that Pat Moore, Brian Noguchi program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, at the time I really loved Burton, and Burton was such a great home for me. And I learned so much and grew so much with that brand. But I just felt like Volcom was such a good opportunity to be kind of on a smaller team with less girls and have a lot more support individually. And so I decided to go with that. And I've been on Volcom ever since.
One thing that the movie really didn't allude to, but what was going on in snowboarding at that time, it's like 2013, 14, 15. It's the start of Chloe Kim and the next generation. And she's too young for the Olympics that year. And you don't make the Olympics either way, so it doesn't matter. But the tricks and the amplitude that she's so consistent with, even then, is so unreal. How do you even stay motivated when you see that, like, that is going to be the future of the sport, and you have to go against that? Because you have like Kelly Clark, who's still there and still has your number, and then you get Chloe. It's like, holy shit, am I only going to be able to get bronze now?
Yeah, I think that reality is a hard thing that people have to face when you have a long career. You start off the rookie and you're the one that's like scaring all the older folks and being like, you're going to have to step up your game. And then eventually you become that veteran. And of course, there's going to be a younger generation coming up. And hopefully, if you've done a good job of inspiring young girls, like hopefully they're riding better than you. And hopefully they're pushing the envelope to a level that you haven't yet. And so I think it's twofold. I think that part of it is intimidating because, I was still competing and wanting to be a part of that. But the other part of it was super exciting and humbling and really, really made me honored to be a part of the sport. I feel like I've given to women's snowboarding and helped progress the sport, and that, these younger girls are coming up and going to continue that. And it was really cool to see. And it's still amazing to see. I mean, I love to see this next generation coming in and just like taking it to a whole new level. It's really, really cool.
Well, I think what's really, really cool with your career, because we're not going to worry about this younger generation until we get through your career, is that 2017 comes around. And I don't know if there's another plan for an Olympic run or not, but going to the X Games and winning that in 2017, when you've got those up-and-comers like Chloe and you're competing against her, and I think you're in gold and she takes bronze, which is pretty amazing. But that has to be the pinnacle of your snowboard career. Like, validates everything you've ever done. It says, hey, I'm still a fucking badass. And it just lets you ride off into the sunset, I feel like. Was that what that contest was for you?
Yeah, totally. It 100% was. I mean, X Games gold had like eluded me my entire career. And to win it that year was just like the most amazing ride off into the sunset. I mean, I still had big goals with the Olympics that I thought I might achieve and things that I had tried to do that I didn't do and all of those things. But to win that event and do it kind of at a time when I had been struggling a little bit in the competitive world and was really like gratifying and will definitely stick with me forever.
I mean, I don't want to say you were done at that point, but I think you had like 2 or 3 ninths in a row or something like that. And if people were going to put money on the event, they weren't going to be betting on you, but they should have, because they would have won like 20-1 odds because you ended up winning the event.
Yeah, totally. I've had that story quite a bit in my career. Like I said, I'm kind of an all or nothing, and it tends to either go my way or really, really not go my way.
And then with contests, I don't know if there's much more competition after that X Games, or is there a retirement moment, or You just go on and do your thing, or how does that work with you when you step down from the competition circle?
Yeah, so I competed the rest of that year and had a couple more podiums, which was awesome. And that kind of motivated me to try to go to the Olympics the following season again. So I went through the qualifying process in 2018 for the Olympics and missed a spot by a few spots, or one spot maybe, but missed qualifying for the Olympic team. And that was kind of the moment where I was like, okay, like, I love competing and I've really grown so much in that side of snowboarding, but I would love to continue to grow as a person and a snowboarder, and wasn't sure how I was going to do that. And then Jeremy Jones actually invited me on a trip that he had been planning, a traverse across the Eastern Sierra Mountains for a film he ended up making called Ode to Mirror. And I, of course, said yes, but it was my first time winter camping, my first time spending that much time on a split board, my first time using crampons. And so I kind of just like dove headfirst into this other side of snowboarding I had very little experience in.
I mean, he's like a leathery badass out there. And yeah, like if you're going out with him, you're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was out in the mountains with one of the masters, and Jeremy's such an amazing mountain mentor. He spent so much time in the mountains, and so his knowledge is just like palatable. And so we camped for 9 nights and traversed across the Sierras. And during that trip, I just realized that like it lit a fire for free riding and for backcountry snowboarding. And I realized that I wanted to pursue that, and to do it properly, I wouldn't be able to have kind of one foot in the contest world and one foot out. And so that was the turning point for me to bring me into free riding.
And I think it's time too. I mean, you had a long, long career of competing. I mean, it's almost like 20 years of just living in the contest world. So it's got to be a relief almost to be done and realize that you don't have to put yourself at risk on every hit in the halfpipe.
Yeah, for sure. It's an amazing lifestyle, but it definitely wears on you. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard to leave your comfort zone and step into something new and step into like that beginner's mind of like starting over. And it can be really scary and deterring. But after I took the leap and really like dove headfirst into free riding, it just renewed this sense of excitement for snowboarding for me. And I am so blessed to have had such a long contest career, and I learned so much and had so many great experiences that I hope to kind of redo that whole lifestyle again in free riding.
Well, that is awesome. And what is also awesome is my next part of the show. It's called Inappropriate Questions. And what I do is I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I was able to get Hana Beaman to come up with 3 questions for you. And she said that you aren't the most inappropriate person, but she is going to come up with some inappropriate questions. So are you ready for question number 1 from Hana?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. So, Elena, talk about a funny or awkward onsen story.
Oh, man. Well, I think what she's referring to is that on our trip to Japan, we ended up spending a month in Japan, which is a long time. I mean, that's enough time to really get to know your crew. And we ended up going to this really amazing, like, traditional onsen. And if you're not familiar, onsens are like a Japanese hot tub, hot spring more so. It's like this hot springs that comes from underground, and all the hotels kind of like harness them into hot tubs, and they separate them into men and women, and you have to go in naked. And it's kind of like this traditional thing. And the Asian culture feels very comfortable, but of course Americans are all weird about it.
Yep.
But we definitely had like some multiple party nights and like throwing snowballs over the bank into the guy's hot tub, and then jumping into the snow banks and doing like laps in the snow.
Just being Americans?
Just being Americans and obnoxious.
Yeah.
But at least it was late night, no one was around, so that's good.
Nice. All right, we will go with question number 2.
What has been the most extravagant or ridiculous trip you've been on with a sponsor?
Ooh, most extravagant. Man, we used to go on some pretty awesome trips back in the day. I would say the most memorable trip that has nothing to do with snowboarding, but I used to ride for Nixon, and they used to do an annual trip to Tabarua. They would rent the whole island out and bring the team and like the executive team. And I got to go the last year that they ever went. And so I got to go as like a snowboarder just to go down and party with the crew for like 2 weeks on this like private island with like all you can eat, all you can drink, and like some of the best athletes in the world. It was pretty epic.
Yeah, it sounds insane. And speaking of partying, you kind of came from a part of snowboarding where you got to see both ends of the, I guess, perspective of an athlete, where in your early days when you were really young, I'm sure you saw the athletes who were partying, maybe going out and having some drinks the night before a contest, or definitely after the contest going out and spending their 10% on their winning fees or whatever that was. Nowadays, you see like the full-on super athletes who are in the gym and not even worried about thinking about partying, that are pretty much very different from the original OG snowboarders. And where do you fit in that mix?
For sure. When I got into snowboarding, it was definitely, the early 90s, and that lifestyle is still alive. And I would say that it's still around these days a little bit, but I've kind of always been in the middle. I definitely appreciate feeling good and taking care of myself. But, long weeks on the road, there's got to be some good party nights.
Yeah, and I would just think your whole life is a party in like après culture when you're not competing on non-contest days. I would think that everywhere you are, people want to take you out for a drink when you get done on the hill.
It happens everywhere pretty much, yeah. But you got to at some point be like, okay, we're going to do some yoga this afternoon rather than go après.
Yeah, well, the people who want to have a long career, they do that.
Yeah, you have to have a little bit of balance.
All right, we will go with our final inappropriate question.
How much money would it take for you to sign an endorsement deal with Totino's Pizza Rolls?
Oh, Totino's Pizza Rolls. I don't know. Like, probably a lot.
I mean, if McDonald's came to you and said, hey, Elena, we want to sponsor you. We want to give you a couple $100,000 a year to ride for McDonald's. What do you say?
No, I think I'd need like $500,000.
So you would sell your soul for $500,000. You'd tell kids to get fat.
I'd want a house. They could buy me a house somewhere, maybe.
So if McDonald's said, Elena, we are going to buy you a house somewhere. It's going to be a nice house. It's going to be a $500,000 house. Can we put your face on the wrapper of the Big Mac?
Oh, the Big Mac?
Well, I mean, they don't want to mess with just like a 2 cheeseburger meal.
Yeah, I don't think I could do it.
All right.
Now that you say it that way.
Okay, well. All right, we're going to go with her final inappropriate question, which I think this is her final one this time.
Okay.
So, Elena, inquiring minds want to know, how do you as a woman handle your womanly moon cycle when out on backcountry trips?
Well, there you go. Her most inappropriate question. How do you handle that in the backcountry? And it's got to be weird because you're probably around a ton of dudes other than the full moon trip that you did. It's probably all dudes a lot of times when you're out in the backcountry.
Yeah, totally. Dudes do not want to deal with that.
But we love talking about it on podcasts, so let's go.
How do you deal with it? Well, hopefully you always have a Diva cup with you, because that's the most clean way to deal with it, so you're not leaving dirty tampons in the backcountry, because that's a no-no.
All right. Well, Diva Cup it is. Well, I want to thank you for your time. It has been awesome going through your life and times after watching this movie, because it's like you go through your life and times and see all this contest stuff and just knowing all the hard work regimen that goes into that. And now it's like you're finally free to do what you want. While there's still going to be just as much work, it probably feels a lot more freeing and a lot more fun and a lot more like snowboarding than contest, I need to win. So thank you for the movie. Thank you for your time, and have a great season.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. What a great conversation. And happy winter.
So that was time with Elena Hight, and what an incredible career she has had. But the funny thing is that when I interview a contest athlete, most times we end up talking about not winning because most competitors don't win that much. I mean, look at Elena. She had an amazing career. She is a super athlete. But if you ask her how many wins she had, there aren't that many. It's just a fact of life for the competitive athlete. And they've learned to deal with that. And now Elena is in a different realm, and it looks good so far. That's the podcast for this week. At this point, I want to give you an update on the 1 million listen mark that we happen to be approaching very fast. We are currently at 987,000 listens, and I will post an image to Instagram when we hit the 1 million listen mark. And that's about it. It's pretty cool, but not that exciting in reality. What is exciting is me reading reviews when they are posted. Sure, all I ask of you is to 5-star rate me, but you can go that extra mile and write a review. Here's what you need to do to either 5-star rate me or write a review if you have an iPhone. First, click the podcast icon on your iPhone. Second, search for the Powell Movement. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Next, give me 5 stars and a review, please. It is greatly appreciated. And you know what else is greatly appreciated? You are. Thank you very much for listening. And finally, please support my amazing sponsors. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Cole Headwear. Have a great week, everyone.